almost every major economy on Earth is drowning in debt. All told, the world's governments owe over $338 trillion. It's 296% or almost 3 times the global economy. That's a number so huge it's hard to even wrap your head around. We're told this debt is a crisis, a time bomb that our kids and grandkids will have to deal with. Welcome to the Money Chronicle, where money, power, and history collide. We picture world leaders in tense meetings, scrambling to balance the books. But what if I told you this debt isn't a flaw in the system? What if it's the system, working exactly as planned? What if this constant cycle of borrowing isn't a problem to be solved, but a product being sold? And what if a hidden network of powerful institutions is the one benefiting most? Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on the secret architecture behind every nation's debt. When you hear the word debt, you probably think of a credit card or a mortgage. You borrow money from a bank and you have to pay it back plus interest. It's easy to assume the same logic applies to our countries. We see headlines about the U.S. national debt soaring past $38 trillion and we ask, who on earth do we owe all that money to? The common answer is other countries, like China or Japan. And while they do hold a big chunk, the real answer is much stranger and a lot closer to home. A massive and growing slice of a nation's debt is money it owes to itself. So, how can a country owe money to itself? The answer lies with one of the most powerful and misunderstood institutions in the world, the central bank. In the United States, it's the Federal Reserve. In Europe, it's the European Central Bank. Nearly every country has one. We're taught they're just boring government bodies that tweak interest rates to keep inflation in check. But they do something else, something much more profound. Through a process called quantitative easing, central banks can essentially create new money out of thin air. And no, they're not firing up giant printing presses. Today, it's as simple as adding a few zeros to an account on a computer screen. They then use this brand new money to buy things. And their favorite thing to buy? Government debt. Think about that for a second. The government needs to borrow money, so it issues bonds. The central bank then creates money that didn't exist a moment ago and uses it to buy those bonds. It's a clean, quiet loop. A huge portion of the national debt is just moved from one government ledger to another, all while that big scary number on the news keeps ticking up. The debt becomes a tool, a pipeline to pump new money into the financial system. The real question is, why? To figure that out, we have to look at who invented this machine in the first place. The blueprint for the system isn't new. It's been perfected over centuries. You can trace it all the way back to 1694, with the creation of the Bank of England. A group of private bankers struck a deal with the King of England who was desperate for cash to fund a war. They agreed to create a bank, lend the government all the money it needed, and in return the government gave them the legal power to issue banknotes. This was the birth of a revolutionary idea, a privately controlled bank that manages a nation's money and funds its debt. This model was copied and refined, leading to what is arguably the most powerful financial institution on the planet, the U.S. Federal Reserve. Created in 1913, the Federal Reserve has a very clever name. It isn't federal in the same way the FBI or the Army is. The Fed is a quasi-public institution, a strange hybrid of government oversight and private interests. Its Board of Governors in Washington, D.C. is a government agency with members appointed by the president. But the system also has 12 regional Federal Reserve banks, which are structured like private corporations. So who owns these regional banks? The very commercial banks in their district. Banks like J.P. Morgan Chase and Citibank are required by law to own stock in their regional Fed. Now, this isn't stock you can buy or sell on the open market. It comes with a dividend that, for the largest banks, is tied to the yield on government bonds. It creates this unique structure where the very banks the Fed is supposed to be regulating are also its shareholders. It's a design that blurs the line between public servant and private club. Today, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet holds trillions of dollars in U.S. government debt, all bought with money it created. It's the ultimate backstop for the system. But the Fed only controls the dollar. How did this model go global? What makes the whole system stick together? The answer is in a quiet, unassuming city in Switzerland. Basel is home to an institution so powerful, yet so obscure. Most people have never even heard of it, the Bank for International Settlements, or the BIS. Founded in 1930, the BIS is often called the Central Bank for Central Banks. It's an exclusive club where the heads of the world's 63 most important central banks, from the US Fed to the People's Bank of China, meet in secret to coordinate global financial policy. The BIS headquarters enjoys immunities that make it almost a sovereign power. Its grounds are untouchable, its staff are immune from prosecution for their official duties, and its assets can't be seized by any government. For all practical purposes, it's beyond the reach of any single country's laws. But the real power of the BIS isn't its secrecy. It's the fact that it writes the rulebook for the entire global banking system. Through a set of regulations known as the Basel Accords, the BIS decides how much risk banks around the world are allowed to take. And here's the secret ingredient that makes the whole debt system work. The Basel Accords established one critical rule. Government bonds are considered the safest, highest quality asset a bank can possibly own. They are treated as essentially risk-free. This didn't happen by accident. The BIS designed the rules that incentivize every major bank in the world to buy and hold government debt. So the BIS doesn't force anyone to buy government bonds. It does something much smarter. It designs the game so that holding government debt is the most logical, profitable, and safest move for every major bank to make. It creates a guaranteed, permanent market for national debt. If you're starting to see how these layers all stack on top of each other, make sure you subscribe, because we're about to pull back the final curtain. What happens when a country can no longer afford to play the game? When a nation gets so deep in debt that it's about to default, threatening to break this cycle, another player steps onto the stage, the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF. Based in Washington, D.C., the IMF markets itself as a financial firefighter, rushing in with emergency loans to save countries from economic collapse. But this rescue money comes with some serious strings attached. The loans are tied to strict conditions known as structural adjustment programs. To get the cash, a country has to agree to radically overhaul its economy. This usually means cutting spending on public services like healthcare and education, selling off state-owned assets like water systems and power companies, and opening up their markets to foreign corporations. While the IMF's stated goal is to create economic stability, its actions often enforce the repayment of debts to international creditors above all else. It is the system's enforcer. When a country stumbles, the IMF steps in, not just to lend money, but to make sure the fundamental rules of the global debt game are followed, and that international banks and bondholders get their money back. It ensures no country can truly opt out of the system. So, let's connect the dots. There isn't a single secret bank. There's a network. At the national level, you have central banks like the Fed, which can create money to buy its own government's debt, making sure the borrowing can go on forever. Watching over them all is the Bank for International Settlements in Switzerland, the private club for central bankers that writes the rules, ensuring that banks worldwide are incentivized to keep buying all that government debt. And if any country threatens to break the chain, the IMF steps in as the enforcer, providing conditional loans that put creditors first and lock the country back into the system. So who really profits from all this? The major international financial institutions, the giant commercial banks. They are the primary dealers who trade bonds directly with central banks. They are the shareholders in the regional Fed banks. They profit from transaction fees and earn interest on the debt they hold. And most importantly, they get to operate in a system that has been engineered to be incredibly stable for them. A system where their core assets, government bonds, are always in demand, and where a global network of power works to manage the risk. It's a perpetual motion machine. Governments need money, so they issue debt. Central banks create a market for that debt. The BIS writes the rules that make this debt the foundation of the financial system. And the commercial banks sitting right in the middle of it all collect the rewards from a game that is tilted in their favor. That number we see on the news, the $338 trillion of global debt, isn't what we think. It's not a bill that someone has to pay back. It is the engine of a global system of finance and control. It starts with the simple fact that governments need to borrow, but it ends in a complex web of powerful, obscure institutions that have engineered an economy built not on savings or production, but on permanent debt. Understanding this is the first step. It changes the conversation from how will we ever pay this back to who designed this system, and is it still working for the rest of us? What do you think? Let me know in the comments, and if this opened your eyes, share it. Help someone else understand the real story behind the headlines.